Hello and welcome to After the Bell, the podcast where we step outside the Founders Academy classroom and get to know the people, the staff and teachers who make our school a vibrant community. I'm your host, Mr. Langdon, a technology teacher, photographer, and filmmaker here at the Founders Academy. Each episode, we sit down with one of our guests to explore their work, passions, experiences, and personal journeys that shape who they are after the last bell rings. And maybe you'll hear something that you never expected. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. So welcome to After the Bell. This is our very first podcast for After the Bell. And today I'm with Mr. Healey. He has been a history teacher here at Founders Academy for 4 years. He holds an undergraduate degree in history from New England College, is in New Hampshire, and is currently working toward a master's degree in American history from Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania. He serves as both the senior capstone advisor and the senior senate advisor. He has published academic papers across various online publications and has earned a teaching award here at Founders. And there is so much more to learn. Welcome, Mr. Healey.
Hey, thanks for having me. First one.
Hey, this is great. It's been great to sit down and have just a regular conversation about not only your work during the day, but also what you do after hours, after the bell, so to speak. So it's great to have you here for the first podcast. Yeah. So let's jump right in. For listeners who don't know you yet, or anything I may have missed there in the intro, what's a lesser-known fact here at Founders Academy? Maybe something personal that people might be surprised to learn.
Well, one of the things that people may not know about me is I write fiction, and I'm a fiction writer typically in the horror genre, and I just recently published a book, actually, called Petition for Return, available on Amazon anywhere you want to. But so that's probably something people really don't know about me. It's been something I've been trying to get more into in the last several years, and I really enjoy it, and it's something to sort of take the edge off when, instead of learning and studying and researching and writing about history, that's the other thing that I do.
I think a lot of students would not think of their history teacher as a horror writer, or is that the category you'd put it in?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's a la Stephen King.
Yeah, there's at least two others who also write fiction, who are also in the sort of horror genre. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you have them on, you'll have to ask them about that. But
so in the writing of this, the writing that you do for yourself, you say it's a departure. What is it that? How far outside of your norm do you go? Like, what's, give us a sense of, just give us a quick synopsis of the book that is it published?
Yeah, it's published. It's
Okay.
available right now, available for anybody to go and buy. It makes, great holiday gifts and everything. But so the book is about a woman named Eleanor, and Eleanor dies. And when she dies, she is put in front of this committee of individuals, sort of like a purgatory, but they don't like it when you call it a purgatory. And when she's put in front of this committee, they sort of weigh her life as though she's on trial. And ultimately what they decide is to send her back to Earth. And she comes back to Earth with sort of this deeper understanding of what the afterlife really is. And then she has, she goes through some trials and tribulations of trying to figure out who these people are part of and what they are. And they're called the committee. So she tries to figure out what the people in the committee are.
So it's very mysterious. As you're describing it, I'm thinking, it sounds like an alien abduction or something. Like there's a a ray of light that comes down and scoops her up.
Yes, no aliens in the book, but I had a lot of fun writing it.
That's cool. It's good to know. So, what attracted you or inspired you to study history and then teaching it? Have you always wanted to teach, or has it always been, what's been kind of like the driving force?
Well, to go all the way back, I guess, what really wanted me to start teaching history was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was my first sort of window into history. What really it was my grandmother who loved Abraham Lincoln, and I sort of started out with a question of why does my grandmother love this man so much? And I, of course, knew who he was. I knew that he, wrote the Gettysburg Address, and I knew that he was a president. And I mean, everybody knows, I think, who Abraham Lincoln is, like from third grade onward. So I decided to figure out what was so fascinating to her about him, and I started reading more, and I was like, this is really interesting, and then I started getting to know, I suppose, or understand Lincoln on a human level, which is really what history is about, is the human individual, and that's it. Really continued on from there, and then I realized that I could actually have a career out of this, so I became just very excited about that prospect.
So was it the 19th century kind of caught you first, during maybe the Civil War period, and then it just kind of expanded from there?
Yeah, and it was just Lincoln at first. No Civil War, no Civil War battles or anything. It was just Abraham Lincoln. That's all I wanted to know. He was my life for 2 years. And then I started getting into the American Revolution, and then my shift and my historical focus and interest, which is what I primarily work on now, is early America stuff. But at first it was just Lincoln, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And then it diverged.
Cool. One of the things that they understand about, after reading a little bit about your background, you've written about, you've written American history topics. You've been interviewed by a few podcasts, and talk about your academic writings. Are you working on something new? I know, is as far as the academic, more the history type things, or is your off time really about writing kind of horror mysteries?
Well, I took I'm in graduate school right now, and I took a hiatus on graduate school for some personal stuff, and then I'm headed back into it fairly soon. But what I've been working on in the interim is I have a website, which is what I try to do with my website is I try to use historical topics that I'm interested in and also relate it to the current moment, because there's so much to talk about in the current moment, of course, but I don't want it to be overly or overtly political. I want it to be the history focus, and I think of course we can learn a lot from the past, but I think giving that historical context is really important, and for whoever ends up reading it, I hope that that's what it ends up coming out to. Mm-hmm. But that's mainly what I work on now for history stuff until grad school starts again.
And I've read that. I spent some time on your website and read some of the articles. I haven't gotten through all of them. There was recently you talk about Ken Burns' new documentary, The American Revolution, and I've actually, last night I saw probably the first half of the first, I guess he calls it a first, I guess what does he call it? Step one or stage one, or however he terms it. But it was interesting. I heard an interview that he did that he has never done reenactments before, and this is the first time that he actually did that because there weren't enough photographs, and so he was able to. So that was kind of a departure for him. It's interesting. I don't know if you kind of noticed that. I know that you've seen a couple of episodes. Is that?
I've seen the majority. I haven't. I have 2 episodes left. Or something like that.
So I'm excited about that. I've had teachers here have asked me as somebody in communications to be able to, filmmaking, to be able to take a look at that. It's been exciting. So I love his stuff. So you teach really a wide variety of history classes here, American, European, world history. Is there anything that I missed that you teach?
I teach an elective called History of the Cosmos, which is a departure for me, but is an interesting concept, and I've loved teaching it so far.
Tell me about that.
So, History of the Cosmos is based on the concept of a historical concept known as big history, and instead of looking at it from the individual perspective, which is what we're taught to do and which we do from the very beginning, we look at it from sort of the largest perspective possible, which is the creation of the universe, and we sort of scale it down, and we go from sort of the different layers and complexities that we have gone through in the universe. And sort of the goal is it's supposed to make sort of students feel small in a world that is so filled with large personalities and large ideas. And it was really important to me. And I've always loved astronomy and I've loved science. And if I wasn't into history, I would have gone into science. But so I've just thought it'd be a really cool idea, and the school was looking for science electives last year, and I threw that name into the hat just to see if it would go, and it went surprisingly, and I'm happy it went. But it really looks at the side of us from a very, very different perspective, and gets down to like the very, very basic level. And for a lot of students, I'm learning in teaching this, they really haven't, remembered or learned or talked about any of this stuff since 6th grade. So now I'm presenting it to the high school, of course, which is, they're at a different stage in their life, of course, and they're, sort of hopefully, my hope is, getting a better understanding of.
Maybe more curious,
yeah,
in a different level.
Exactly.
More maturity.
Exactly. More curious on a larger scale. Yeah.
I've always, when they've explained things in terms of time, like how long the universe has been in existence, and how would they map that against a 1 hour on a clock.
Yes.
And where we are today.
Yep.
And it's amazing when you hear that in terms of time, and then you're probably talking about molecules the size of stars, and how many stars, and how long it takes light to reach the Earth, and just how small we are, and how brief history and time that we actually exist.
Yes, and that's absolutely the purpose is to look at it from that angle, and show students that we really haven't been here for that long. It seems like a long time because we have so many historical topics and the whole thing, but we really haven't been here that long.
Right. When you think about all the things that happened before it started getting recorded.
Right. Right. Before recorded history is, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's it. So this is your first semester teaching that?
First semester, and it was, I'm lucky enough that I got a second semester
good.
Course too, so I'm excited for that.
Good. That's excellent. So kind of a second part to that is, if you could choose kind of a period in American history where you most enjoy learning about and teaching, what would it be? Well,
my research interest, of course, is early America, specifically early American New England, and I've always loved teaching that. I've never taught that at the upper high school level. I taught it a little bit in AP US history, which was fun. But in more recent years, I teach US History 3, which is a new concept course that we created for many reasons, which we can talk about if you want. But one of the things that I'm really enjoying is talking about the Vietnam War, and specifically, talking about things that really these students have never been exposed to before. And there's still a lot of Vietnam veterans here today and alive and still very well part of our society. And it's also different because it's the first televised war, right? So there's so much footage and you know, letters and pictures and the whole thing. And then the second thing I really enjoyed teaching is the War on Terror, which has been a really fascinating topic to discuss with the students, because that's even more recent and even more almost pertinent to them, because they probably have family members now who have participated in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, you know, the farther we go and the closer we get to 2025, the more interesting it almost becomes for them in a way. So I've really enjoyed teaching those two specific things.
Yeah. You know, all they see is planes going into a building, and never really kind of lived through maybe what their mother and father experienced.
None of them were born during 9/11.
Right,
None
exactly.
Of them.
I mean, it's 24 years ago. So that's so, you know, they hear about it, and it's interesting that we've lived through it, and we have our own kind of vision of it. But that's kind of the third eye that they don't see, because they never lived through it. They're just hearing other people's experience.
And we always do we do a sort of in memoriam thing here at Founders, and you know, they've done it every year since I've been here, and I think they're not necessarily used to that, but I think they know what to expect when we talk about those type of things. So when I can go into deeper things beyond the 9/11 attacks, it really gives them sort of a deeper perspective as to what society was like post 9/11.
Yeah, some of the motivations for before, during, and after.
Yes.
That's interesting. So what parallels, kind of, if any, do you see kind of in the current state of affairs, what's happening now, and, you know, kind of previous history? It may have nothing to do with the War on Terror, but, you know, there's a lot in the news right now about democracy, and that's a follow-up question here. But, you know, what kind of parallels do you see of what's happening now versus, you know, things that you've taught as part of history?
Well, without getting political, I think so. There's a very famous saying that history repeats itself, and everybody says it, and everybody, like, I've heard it more in the last 4 years than I've ever heard it in my entire lifetime, and I don't agree with that statement. Mark Twain is reported to have said that history rhymes, and I like that a lot better. And, you know, basically, of course, what that means is that the history will never repeat itself, of course, verbatim, and I think it's a bit foolish to think that it will. But I think there are certain elements of historical concepts and historical ideas and historical movements in which we see a lot of these parallels. And in fact, one of the things that I was talking to students about today, we were watching a documentary on the Vietnam War. And one of the things that the photojournalists, and you'll be interested in this, one of the things that the photojournalists were talking about is that they saw a lot of parallels from Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan in terms of photojournalism. And they did a sort of side-by-side of the photojournalism that was taking place in Vietnam and the photojournalism that was done in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was fascinating to me. But of course, those are two very different conflicts. Those are two very different motivations. I mean, they probably cannot be more different. But the parallels are there, and the anti-war protests were there, and the people who supported the war were there. So the parallels are definitely there. As for the current state of democracy, I think the biggest thing, and I've probably beat a dead horse with this, but the biggest thing for me empathy, and particularly historical empathy. And I've tried my absolute hardest to instill that in students as much as I can, to feel empathy for, when we talk about Vietnam or the War on Terror, whatever we're talking about. It's important for students to understand the empathy that we have for these individuals, whether it be regardless of how they feel about the political situation, the military conflict. I mean, if you have empathy is going to really, really,
We're talking about human beings.
Yeah.
We're not talking about machines.
Exactly. And that's the perspective I try to take with it, is the human component and the human side of it. And sometimes that's difficult with certain topics, but the human side of things is for me one of the most important aspects. And I think if you have empathy, I think that really sets you and others apart. And I think me in the history class and all the other history teachers we have really try to instill that in students.
How do you, when we're talking about, I know democracy, we're kind of dipping our toe in here. How does the discussion of democracy, small d, come into your teaching? Small d meaning democratic principles, not the party. How do you talk about democracy in school here?
I mean, it's pretty much brought up, if not every day, every other day, in terms of how democracy, and specifically the American history courses that I teach, specifically trying to talk about how have people felt about democracy over the years. Because if you look at, something like the Cold War era, or you look at something like the American Revolution, or whatever however you want to tackle it, the question of democracy and the questioning of the deterioration of democracy is always there. Always. People believe that it is the end of the end whenever they're in it. And, when we talk about something like 1968 in particular, where, RFK gets assassinated, MLK gets assassinated, LBJ decides to not run for re-election. People thought that was it, man. That was the end of democracy, and democracy is over. And of course it wasn't. And democracy, ended up prevailing, and the ideals of the democratic principles in our Declaration of Independence have prevailed. And I can't quite pinpoint as to why that is, but it has. And I'm not saying it's not possible for it to go away, because it certainly is. And that's sort of one of the things we were talking about Ken Burns earlier. One of the arguments in Ken Burns' documentary is that this is an American experiment, and we are part of this American experiment, and how interesting it is that we are coming up on our 250th anniversary. And the likelihood of a country surviving, we're still so young, and compared to other, like if you look at the Roman Republic, if you look at the Greeks, I mean, pick any other civilization, we're so
even the United Kingdom is is very old, but not the oldest. And much of what we're doing today is modeled after them. But it is our own, and it's not the same. And it is an experiment. That's a great way to put it.
Absolutely. And that's why I think like his documentary is important, because he really highlights that that idea that we're involved in an American experiment. And the thing about experiments is they can go wrong, and they have bumps in the road. But the way we react to that is the important thing.
Right. Is in many respects falling back on founding fathers and the foundational documents, right? I mean, that's hopefully what keeps us on track, right? I mean, that's but then there are a lot of emotions involved that take people left or right of that track,
And that's why, like, sometimes I stress to students that the Constitution has only been changed 27 times.
Wow.
27 times is not very many for a country that's 200 and Constitution 240 years old or so.
Yeah.
That's really not that many.
Yeah.
So that, is interesting that it's only been changed 27 times. And some of those amendments, like the quartering of soldiers and congressional pay, like some of that really isn't necessarily relevant to our daily lives. But of course, some of them very much are.
All right, so we're going to move on something a little bit faster paced. We call it the thunder round, not to be confused with the lightning round. It's a thunder round because we've got thunder sound effects. Okay, so here's the thunder round. Okay, ready?
Am I going fast here?
If you'd like.
Okay. All right. I'll follow.
How do you wake up in the morning? Coffee, tea, Red Bull, water, or something else?
Coffee mostly.
What kind of coffee?
Depends on the flavor of the season, pumpkin spice and I'm very basic. I'm very basic, but I love coffee.
Okay, so second one, a day off relaxing is spent. You fill in the blank.
Reading, writing, hanging out with the wife, shopping for books. And just to point out, book collecting and reading books, those are two very different hobbies. So those
yes.
I separate them purposely. Playing video games, potentially.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Third question, read the book, then watch the movie, or read the book, no movie, or watch the movie, then read the book?
Usually... depends on how interested I am in the movie. If I'm really interested in the movie, I'll read the book, watch the movie. If I'm not confident that the movie is going to be any good, I watch the movie. And then the movie is good and surprises me, I'll read the book. But usually always read the book first.
Yeah, that's the way I've been. I don't do as much reading as you do, I'm sure, but I like to read the book first.
Yeah.
So last question. Who of the following would be your preference for a 3-hour dinner? Nathaniel Hawthorne, H.P. Lovecraft, Harriet Beecher Stowe, or Emily Dickinson, and why? Hawthorne, Lovecraft, Beecher Stowe, Dickinson.
Man. They're all so different in personality.
That was my challenge.
Gosh. I'd love to hang out with Lovecraft, but he's just such a raging racist that I don't think it would. I don't think it would be very useful conversation. Who are the other three? Hawthorne,
so we've
Dickinson,
got
and
Hawthorne, Lovecraft, Beecher Stowe, or Emily Dickinson.
Probably Harriet Beecher Stowe. Her Uncle Tom's Cabin is like one of the quintessential early documents to begin the Civil War, and her. I'm not sure the success of, the end of slavery is really as successful ultimately, and I put that in italics. Without that book is one of the most important, and I would really pick her brain about that book.
That's interesting. That'd be good.
Yeah.
That was unexpected. I thought for sure you might say Lovecraft because of your writing, your personal writing.
Yeah. I would have. I don't know if I could actually do it.
Oh, because you wouldn't feel comfortable with his personal thoughts.
No, because he would always bring it back to that, and I just it's not comfortable with that. Again,
we're talking with Mr. Ethan Healey, the history teacher here at the Founders Academy, and we're going to come back here for some final discussion here on After the Bell. A couple more questions here, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into kind of some personal things here.
Sure.
Personal, but not off limits. So I read that you are a collector of antiquarian books, and I can see that the connection to history, it's right there. So tell me about your interest in old books. How did you get started collecting? Do you have any favorites?
Any favorites that I own?
Yeah, yeah. Or that you'd like to own, but they're too expensive.
Oh man, I mean the number one book for me is if I ever get a first edition Lord of the Rings, that's my that's my love, and I love Lord of the Rings and the Tolkien world.
Uh-huh.
That's my dream, but I don't have $40,000 to spare anytime soon. So that will not
College first.
Yeah, exactly. Graduate school first. So that's my dream. Sort of. That's not necessarily antiquarian, but it's an old one.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really obsessed with signed books.
Uh-huh.
I love books that are signed by the authors, and I have a lot of them, and I've sort of collected a lot over the years. How I got started doing that was I never read books growing up. None of my parents read. Nobody in my family read, actually. So it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln that I started reading, and I went to the library, and it was like a whole new world. And that's when I realized and started figuring out that learning about Lincoln the human was a lot more interesting than, Lincoln who, was sitting in the White House. Learning about Lincoln as an individual and his humor and his lifestyle, the way he lived, and the whole thing. And that's when I started to collect books. And when I got, older and was able to have a home of my own where I could actually put books...
A bookshelf.
A bookshelf, right, without, traveling and having to bring it everywhere. It's just something that I've just always enjoyed, and I love, the idea of holding a library as a collection of memories and stories, and I don't know. I just
there is definitely a passion to have that on the wall. You can walk up and grab something and kind of relive something, time of your life, a gift from someone,
yes,
that kind of thing. It's neat. My wife is a collector too, and she collects Louisa May Alcott books, some Hawthorne, and Charles Dickens. So we had a chance to visit Dickens' house when we went to London, and we got to see where a lot of things were, where Oliver Twist was written right at this desk. It was pretty cool.
That's incredible. That'd be another book I would get as a first edition of Christmas Carol,
mm-hmm.
which is one of my favorite books, and I read it every holiday. I love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as some of our listeners may know, you and one of our founders' Spanish teachers, Kiana Healey, are married. So I have to ask, what's it like working with a spouse?
I'm so glad I can clear the air with this question, actually. So a lot of people have their own idea of what that is like, and a lot of people think it is incredibly stressful, and it is the amount of times I've gotten comments that say I could never work with my wife, or I could never work with my spouse. We get that a lot from colleagues, but also friends of ours and the whole thing. And it works for us. Oftentimes, we live about 45 minutes away, so we often have the drive to and fro, and that drive is a de-stressor in terms of talking about our day, talking about what we're going to do in school. Sometimes we work through some of the issues we're dealing with, and it's some people have outright said, like, don't you ever get sick of hanging out with your wife? And I really don't, because she's my best friend, and we get along so well that it really has never become a major issue for us. And of course there are times where it becomes stressful, and sometimes you wish there were alternatives, but the majority of the time it works for us. we enjoy each other's presence. We have, lunch together. We have, if she needs me to sub in for her, I sub in for her. She does the same for me.
That's a great idea.
So
That's good, kind of built in.
So
Last minute.
she's phenomenal, and I'm very, very lucky to have her. And she's, it's not as bad as people think it is, and the only thing I can say to that is it just works for us.
Yeah. Well, it just that speaks to the relationship you have, and it shows. I think all of us know that you guys have a great relationship. Or you're faking it, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're faking it the whole time.
Last question I have is, I read a poem of yours titled New England Present Tense on your website, and I could see your love of New England. It really shines through. Kind of a little flavor of Robert Frost, a little bit in there.
Thank you.
Do you use poetry at all in your classroom? How do you bring it into kind of a historical perspective of rhyming or unrhyming poetry, or from a historical sense? Maybe there's information in a poem that talks to a part of history that you're covering.
Yeah, there's actually for the War on Terror, there's a brilliant publishing company called Dead Reckoning Collective, which one of our history teachers, Mr. E, has been published under. And one of their projects they have every year or every other year, I think it is a collection of poetry from Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. And I've collected their collections over the last 2 years or so, and I use some of those poems in my stuff and in the teaching, because it's, for a lot of students, it's very, very accessible. And sometimes in those poems, they're talking about things that these students just cannot comprehend at all. So sometimes that really, really connects them and helps. And so I don't use poetry too often. I use other literature, and I've used books and essays and stuff like that, but the poetry mostly comes in the more modern side of things.
Yeah. So we are going to wrap things up there. We want to thank Mr. Healey for sharing your world with us as a Founders Academy history teacher, and so much more. And you can read more about Mr. Ethan Healey in his passions on his website, ethanhealey.com. And again, Ethan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Listen to us next time when we sit down with science teacher Professor Joe Arthur for another episode of After the Bell.